China's got a huge smoking problem. People there smoke nearly half the world's cigarettes each year. Smoking rates have barely budged in decades. It wasn't supposed to be this way. 20 years ago, China and 191 other governments voted to adopt a landmark anti-tobacco treaty, the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control.
The treaty was born out of an absolute need to address tobacco control because the number of smokers was increasing, the number of deaths were increasing, the statistics were becoming much more clear.
Treaty requirements included bans on advertising, making tobacco companies disclose the cancer-causing chemicals in their products, and passing smoke-free laws to protect people from secondhand smoke. In the 2 decades since the treaty took effect, global tobacco use rates have declined substantially, but not in China. The reason why? The country's powerful state-run tobacco company, China Tobacco.
They've got a massive tobacco monopoly industry, which is an inherent part of the government.
An investigation by the Examination and global media partners shows that China Tobacco fought the treaty at every turn. Judith Mackay was a driving force behind the treaty and traveled to Geneva in 2003 for the negotiations. Most countries sent health officials, but China's delegation was unusual. It also included top executives from China Tobacco.
I was aware that the tobacco monopoly were there. In fact, I often used to go and sit next to them or engage them in conversation and just sort of try and chat to them.
After the treaty was drafted, China's diplomats asked to proofread the Chinese version from the WHO. They gave the draft to China Tobacco's executives, who made dozens of changes, weakening the treaty language. That's according to China Tobacco itself, which bragged about how it had changed the wording in a little-known book. The company's executives even specified some of the exact words and phrases they changed in the Chinese text of the treaty. We wanted to know how many of these changes actually made it into the official Chinese version of the treaty. So we hired a translator to review the official English and Chinese language versions posted on the website of the United Nations. We also consulted a scholar of Chinese translation. They found that in dozens of places, English words like shall were replaced with weaker language, such as should or is desirable. Phrases like comprehensive tobacco control were also changed to extensive tobacco control. These changes have real-world impact. China Tobacco altered the treaty's language about warnings on cigarette packs. Today, China has some of the world's weakest health labels. Moreover, China Tobacco itself gets to set the standards for how big the warning labels are and what they should say. Can you spot the warning labels on these Chinese cigarette packs? How about these from Australia and Turkey? Another change was to the convention's rules about smoking in public places. The English treaty says that each country shall ban smoking in indoor public places nationwide, but the Chinese treaty just says each country should do that. To this day, there is no national ban in China. Some cities have passed smoke-free laws, but less than 20% of the population is covered by them. Here's translation scholar Yvonne Li.
So by choosing a particular expression that has a reduced level of urgency, you go from you must do this in this time frame to, well, we suggest that you do this in the near future. The sense of urgency is certainly not the same. However, unless you're someone who knows legal language in both English and Chinese, you probably wouldn't notice that subtlety. And this type of change is also very consistent.
One of the most consequential changes to the treaty related to government's relationship with the tobacco industry. Signatories of the original convention said their governments shall protect their public health policies from the influence of the industry. But China Tobacco made this optional. And as we've seen, the company's influence is everywhere in China's smoking laws. In fact, both China Tobacco and its parent ministry have seats on the 8-member committee that sets China's tobacco control policy. China's health ministry has just 1 seat.
I feel that there is a very clear issue over here that there's probably conflict of interest. Those who are supposed to be regulated become active participants in formulating the regulations.
We reached out to China Tobacco, the Chinese government, and the WHO. They did not respond to our questions. The secretariat that oversees the WHO treaty told us their office wasn't created until years after the treaty was finalized, and they couldn't say if any past staff members were aware of the translation issue. China has taken some steps to limit tobacco advertising, to curb underage smoking, and to bar government officials from smoking in public. But China Tobacco has proven a formidable foe. Cigarette sales in China are still rising. Each year, more than 1 million Chinese people die from smoking-related diseases, a figure projected to rise to 3 million by 2050. The reason China Tobacco has so much power in China's government is simple. Last year, the company brought in $213 billion. That's 7% of government revenues, or about the same amount as China's official defense budget.
The problem is, unless it can rein in this industry, which is opposing the health people all the time, unless it can in some way prevent them and stop their influence, I don't think it's going to be easy in China. And the question is this industry untouchable, the tobacco monopoly? And that's a very difficult question to answer.